And sometimes like I could, you know, if I think about it, it's like I could almost weep thinking about, like, he was that kind of guy. He was the kind of guy that regardless of what job you were doing, whether you liked it or not, you could work beside him for the rest of your life and be content. That's the kind of influence that he had, his presence. Yes.
All right, how's it going, everybody? This is Brandon McCaskill. This is the Safari Arie experience with Arie Hoogerbrug. This is the extended show where we kind of talk as long as we want. So I hope you guys enjoy the show. Arie, how's it going?
Awesome. Yeah, you did a great intro there.
Thank you. That's the fifth try, but we got it.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit. You talk a lot about Belize on your Facebook profile, and
oh yes,
the videos, the interviews that we have, you mention Belize every now and then. And a few weeks ago, you gave me an in-depth conversation and a look at why you started the whole reptile scene. And so I kind of want to do the same thing with you. Can you kind of take us a deep dive into what Belize is all about? Like, what's the connection between you and Belize?
Yeah, no, Belize, I actually categorize it as like one of the greatest countries in the entire world. I absolutely love Belize. Oh yeah, no, I love Belize. So yeah, it's a fairly long story, but let's see what we can whip off. So I was introduced to Belize literally back in 1996, give or take, at some point in that year. I don't really recall when that was, but anyways, like you referenced, the reptile show that we did, the people that actually got me into that reptile business, they were actually going back and forth to Belize. And maybe on a side note, we probably want to link that reptile video to this video as whatever, as you know, how you link stuff or whatever.
It'll show up right there.
Sure.
Or there.
Anyways, so I was in the reptile business scene, and the people that actually got me in that business, they were actually going back and forth. It was a husband-wife, Dan and Heather team. Anyways, they were going back and forth for a few years. And then what happened is one day I was actually in their basement because they, like I said, they got me into the reptile business, and they were actually Dan was writing out an invoice for me for a bunch of stuff that I had sold. And I was literally twiddling my thumbs sitting beside him, literally out of boredom, because he's writing an invoice and I'm like just sitting there.
Yeah.
So I asked him this question literally out of boredom. And I actually didn't even really care what the answer was. Like, that's how bored it was. Like, you know what I mean? And so I asked him, I said, just like you did, what's the deal with Belize? Like, why do you go back and forth?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but for me, it was just like, because you gotta remember, is back then I was like 20-ish. And so my life revolved around materialism.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand or appreciate why someone would go on vacation or holidays and spend, you know, X amount of thousands of dollars for, say, 2 weeks, when you could buy like a TV, a VCR, a stereo, you know, something like that would last years. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. So anyways, like I said, didn't care what the answer really was. It was a question out of boredom. I said, what's the deal? Why do you guys go to Belize? And without any agenda, he just literally for about 30 minutes just kind of explained, you know, what they're doing down there, what they see down there, what the culture's like, just the day-to-day living. And I just, like, I could not believe there was this kind of world out there, you know. And I mean, because I was like in Hamilton, Ontario, which is not exactly a very exciting place to live, you know. And that was my world, was Hamilton, Ontario. And he's telling me about this other world, like of jungle and rainforest. And because what they were actually trying to do was build an ecotourist camp. And so they were literally building the road. There was a road allowance, but it was all jungle. So they were actually building the road, like on the road allowance, to get themselves into the jungle, and all these different animals and creatures and that they would see on a daily basis. And I just, like I said, I just, wow, like, I could not believe it. And as crazy as this sounds, crazy as this sounds, at the end of the conversation, I turned to him and I said, I'm moving there. I had never seen a photo. I had never, literally at the end of that conversation, I said, I'm going to move there.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Anyways, situation was though, is that being at that age, like I think I was 20, 21, a couple things. One, I had my first credit card that was maxed out. So, so I had a maxed out credit card. I'd actually just bought a house. Actually bought my first house right before my 20th birthday. And being self-employed now,
yeah.
The idea is you keep investing money into your business kind of deal. And so I had all these things going on, and I just told him that, hey, I'm moving there. So anyways, it took a little while to get the credit card paid off. And I just kind of, that became my focus, is saving every penny I could to pay my credit card off. And then basically, it took about a year or so, give or take. And then I basically, one day I showed up at his place because I was selling stuff, selling stuff, with the business or whatever. And one day I was able to show up and go, okay, I'm ready to move to Belize. Just like that. He's like, oh, okay, I guess you're serious. And he's like, well, I actually have to go down to Belize, I guess in a couple months or whatever, which would have been November 1997. He's like, I have to go down for 2 weeks because we had just planted this field crop of rice. They cleared like 10 acres and they had planted rice. And what happened is the tractor that was going to come in from another farm to harvest that rice had broken down. And being a third world country, they couldn't get the replacement parts to fix the tractor. And so they had no one to harvest this rice. And it's like, if you don't harvest the rice when it's ready to be harvested, it will literally go to the birds, kind of deal. And so he's like, I have to go in November for 2 weeks. I suggest that maybe you come with me for that particular trip to make sure that this is actually what you want to do. Because basically this whole situation, like this goal, this whatever you want to call it, this motivation, was based on a 30-minute conversation. Beyond that, I knew nothing about the country. I had never even actually been on a plane prior to that. Like, that's how spontaneous this decision for me that I was going to move to this country was. And he's like, maybe you want to come down for 2 weeks to make sure this is what you actually want to do before you sell your house. Because I was going to sell my house and everything. And I said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's actually a pretty wise idea. Go down for 2 weeks, make sure you actually want to do it. And so my very first trip was in November of 1997, and I'll actually never forget it. Belize is a fairly small country. The airport is fairly small. You actually, I don't know what you call them, but when you land, at the airport, they have one of those pickup trucks with the stairs come up to you. I don't know what you actually call those particular vehicles, but anyways, whatever. Stair truck, sure, good enough. Anyways, so in Belize, a stair truck comes up so that you can disembark off the plane onto the tarmac and then go into customs, kind of deal. And I still remember, because this was also my very first time I'd ever been on a plane. So I come up to the front of the plane and I come to the door, and two things. One, the airport was completely surrounded by jungle. And so just view, and then just the humidity and people that have actually been in these, on a plane where they disembark on the tarmac, the humidity just envelops you. And most people don't like humidity. I love humidity. And so just having that humidity just envelop me, and having the view of the jungle completely all around you. No word of a lie. In that second, I was completely in love with that country. Within that second, I was home. And literally from that entire moment on, every aspect of I was in love. Like, I had never been so content, comfortable, happy to be somewhere ever in my entire life. It was just the most amazing experience. Anyways, we got to this farm. It was basically in the middle of the jungle. We're in the village of Scotland Half Moon.
Yeah.
For anyone that is somewhat familiar with Belize or whatever, if you want to look for it on the map, it's basically right beside the village of Bermudian Landing. And we are in the community baboon sanctuary. And anyways, the farm is, like I said, in the middle of the jungle down this dirt road. And we went to the farm. At the time, it was basically, we stayed in tents. We had these big kind of surveyor type canvas tents that you could actually stand up inside. Like there was a bed and the dresser inside. And basically what happened is, or what the deal was, is they had built this platform off the ground, set the tent on the platform, and then they had a kind of a protective roof with palm fronds, for rain or whatever. So additional protection from the rain. And so, yeah, I lived in this tent, or I stayed in this tent, and for 2 weeks, basically, we actually picked rice. As crazy as it sounds, it was, yeah, like they just had this, it was what it was is there was a local Belizean, and he had two 30-acre parcels of land. There was kind of the main farm, 30 acres, where they had some cattle, and they had this eco tourist camp that I had mentioned earlier that Dan and Heather were trying to get going. And then they had another 30-acre parcel that was mostly, it was just jungle, but they had cleared off some land to plant this rice kind of deal. And so for the next 2 weeks, we literally handpicked the rice. We didn't get very much of it off. I mean, long story short, the whole crop was more or less a complete wash kind of deal, as a lot of things in a third world country kind of end up kind of deal. But in that time, like, tree frogs and turtles and just all these, and I should mention, like, it's in the middle of what they call the community baboon sanctuary. And that's this kind of grassroots conservation initiative that I think was started in 1985. And what it is it's like 20 square miles. It encompasses like 7 villages and potentially like 200 local farms have sort of voluntarily agreed to leave corridors in their fields and leave certain trees. And all this is actually to help the black howler monkey. Locally they call it a baboon, but basically it's the black howler monkey. And so they're basically everywhere in that area. We're basically right on the Belize River. And so it's pristine habitat for these black howler monkeys. And so in the interest of trying to sustain their populations, a couple scientists went in years and years ago, obviously before 1985, to study the monkeys and what they needed and this and that. And so they came up with this game plan, and ever since it's been successful kind of deal. Yeah, it was the most amazing experience of my life kind of deal. I should maybe, just as a side note, basically what the situation was in regards to the farm. There was a local Belizean couple, Mel and Hilda Hendy. They owned the two 30-acre parcels, 60 acres, right on the Belize River. And Dan and Heather, basically what happened was Dan and Heather were trying to start this eco-tourist camp, and they just so happened to find the road that Mel and Hilda lived on. But Mel and Hilda were simple farmers. It wasn't a road, it was just a pathway that Mel used to ride his horse up and down, or Hilda, they used to ride their horse up and down to get to the main road, to catch the bus to the city for supplies kind of deal. So it was literally a horse path on a road allowance. And basically what happened was Dan and Heather, because they wanted to, they found this place. I don't really remember the story of how they found this place, but there was this road allowance, so they had been surveyed for that, and all the land had been surveyed at some point, and so then they found this piece of land, somewhere between, it was basically halfway between the village and where we are. We're about 3 kilometers from the village at the end. Like if you're on the main road, the village is sort of near the main road. And if you just walk through down the road, you'll walk through the village, but then eventually there's nobody else. And it's just this road that goes to the jungle. And like I said, it's about a 3-kilometer road, give or take. And it dead ends right on the Belize River, which is also where the farm is. So our closest neighbor is actually about a 35-minute walk kind of deal. But anyways, like I said, Dan and Heather, they were building this road in towards Mel and Hilda's place. Not, the intention was never to go that far. They were just trying to get themselves to the piece of land that they had found that was quote unquote available. And so, but what happened was, is like many things that, you know, in a third world country, they had gotten so far and then things started to fall apart. I think all of a sudden then the land wasn't available, or they realized that it was going to be too much work to try to acquire that land. But in the meantime, Mel had been going back and forth on his horse. So Mel was actually employed to help them get this going and this and that. And then it got to a point where they actually had to abandon the project, come back to Canada to regroup and think about, okay, how do we proceed kind of deal. And what happened was while they were in Canada, Hilda sent Dan and Heather a letter to say, hey, you know, we have lots of land. Why don't we do this ecotourist camp on our farm kind of deal? And so that's how that, so yeah, so a Belizean couple owned the land, and then Dan and Heather, you know, were the connection, and that's how, and then, you know, they got me into the reptile business, which is how I got connected with Belize. Because that's always, you know, the interesting trick about, you know, for someone who would like to move to, you know, a third world country or a jungle or something like that, you know, the secret, the trick is actually to be connected with some people, with people that are actually already down there, you know, kind of deal. But yeah, that's sort of, yeah. And like I said, that the 2 weeks was the most amazing 2 weeks of my life, and I loved every single minute of it. I love everything about Belize, the backwardness, the culture, the people. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and that just kind of fills in context where someone like me newly got to know you this, or I guess in 2020 we met, but seeing you take on this bike ride that just seems so like out there, but knowing this story that this is kind of the guy that you are, like you're just very adventurous. You got this adventurous spirit in you.
Yeah.
Kind of, it makes total sense that this is something you would do. And you said you were how old at this point when you first heard about Belize from your friend?
Well, that was like 1997. And I don't, like, I would have been like 22-ish. I don't know. I'm really bad with my math. I'm 47. It's 2021, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is 1997. So it would have been my early 20s. Like I said, I just recently bought a house. I started that reptile business in 1995.
Right.
And then actually, so I mean, I went down in 1997 for the 2 weeks, because obviously I came back to Canada when I said I was moving to Belize.
Right.
Basically what happened is I went in 1997 for the 2 weeks, amazing 2 weeks, came back to Canada and got my affairs in order, ended up selling my house to my brother. And I went back in 1998, January of 1998 is when I kind of quote unquote officially moved down there. Problem is after I got down there, it's like I didn't know what to do next. I had this goal that I focused on, that I sacrificed to get everything that, you know what I mean, to make it happen. And then I got down there and it was like, oh, now what? I literally kind of felt, it's funny because Belize is very, you know, living there is very, very labor intensive. Everything is just nothing. Yeah, it's very labor intensive. But at the same time, it's like I felt like I had retired literally at like 24 or 22, 23, whatever it was, however old I was.
Yeah.
And so I ended up staying there for 3 months. And then that's when I was like, well, now what do I do?
Yeah.
And so then I started thinking about like my business that I had left, because like I said, Dan and Heather was already living. Heather was, by that time that I was down there, that I went down there, Heather was basically living there full time at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
and Dan was going back and forth running the reptile business in Hamilton,
Yeah.
and Heather was staying there full time. And so when I went down there in 1998, Heather was in, like, there was basically two tents for their eco-tourist camp. Heather was in one and I was in the other. So
Yeah.
they could, actually, sorry, it's coming back to me. Heather was actually, because I was down there, Heather moved into the house with Mel and Hilda kind of deal, so that there would be one tent available for guests kind of deal.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember we did have some people, and I actually got evicted out of my tent so they could go in there, and I had to go into some little pup tent type deal. But basically what happened is when I went down to like move in 1998, Dan and his partner Rick, they took over my old business kind of deal. And so then fast forward, it's like, okay, I'm down there for like 3 months, and I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And so then I started thinking about the whole business side of things and what was my potential and what was I capable of doing. And I got this idea that I could somehow build this business and go back and forth from Canada to Belize kind of deal.
Yeah.
Completely unrelated. That didn't work as far as going back and forth kind of deal. But what happened is I decided to go back to Canada to see what my potential for, the business side of things was. And Dan and they just handed my business back to me kind of deal. And then that's when I kind of went crazy with growing the business, which I'm not going to get into because that's more or less dealt with in that reptile video kind of deal.
Yeah.
So anyways, I ended up only staying there for 3 months kind of deal. To add to the story of Belize, it was like 2002. All of a sudden I realized because I went in 1998, and then I went back up and I built this business and a store and 13 employees. I guess I'm getting back into the reptile side of things. But anyways, all of a sudden one day I wake up and it's like, holy crap, like I had this dream and goal about Belize. It's 2002 and I haven't been since 1998. Like, what happened? So there was an aspect where I was like, my priorities are all wrong and they're all screwed up kind of deal. And so I got completely out of the business, and went back down to Belize. But then when I got down there, I realized, okay, I want to buy land or buy land so I could build a home and this and that, which is a very tedious, complicated, slow process of trying to purchase land down there, because the reality is when a local sees that you're from North America, their $10,000 piece of land, whatever, how many acres, somehow mysteriously becomes $350,000 US.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, dude, it's $10,000. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's a very slow, tedious process. So back up to Canada, and I said, okay, Dan, like, you go find me that, my land and my, you know what I mean, kind of deal. And you just we'll just, whatever. And so what had happened is, in the meantime, by 2002, they had actually built their own house. They had kind of gone from the tent to a house.
Yeah.
And so while I was back up in Canada for a few months or whatever, they sent me this letter and said, hey, we have this idea if you're interested, because we're thinking about building a second home. If you're interested, you could purchase our first home. And because they had built a house on the farm, the 130 acre parcel.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't actually technically their land. So they said, we will sell you our house to you, and we'll get a 3/4 acre lot surveyed out of the main farm kind of deal.
Yeah.
And so I thought about it, and I thought, oh, okay, that actually sounds like a pretty good idea. Like, it's a, quote unquote starter home in the very least kind of deal.
Yeah.
And so in 2003, I went back down, and that's when I purchased my home with a 3/4 acre parcel.
Yeah.
And from there, it was a very, when I went down for the purchase, I was down there for about 6 months, and then, ran out of money and had to come back to Canada to work. And then from there, it was kind of like back and forth, sometimes every year for 2 weeks, sometimes a few years missed, sometimes I'd go down for a month kind of deal. So it was a real hit and miss as far as my visits. And it wasn't until like 2010 that I actually spent like 11 months down there. That was probably that's been my longest stint ever, was 11 months. And actually during that time, while I was down there, I was able to negotiate with the Belizean guy, Mel, for another sort of 3/4 acre parcel,
Hmm.
because what the situation with my little piece, my 3/4 acre parcel is, I was like like a couple 100 feet from the Belize River.
Hmm.
And there was this weird little piece of property, because the farm was completely around me. I was on the main road,
Yeah.
but because the farm was around my property, there was this just little tag of land between me and the river.
Hmm.
And so I talked to Mel and I said, like, if we continue the survey line straight to the river, it's only like 3/4 of an acre extra kind of deal.
Yeah.
Can I purchase that from you? And it's like, because it's not like he was doing anything with that because it was so close to my house. So
Yeah.
basically, yeah. So I ended up buying another 3/4 acre parcel. So basically,
Hmm.
the house is on an acre and a half, and that actually gives me the actual river frontage on Belize River. And so
Cool.
that was 2010. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then, moving then from there, um, what happened next? So probably then the next event was, like, say, in 2013, just as I was getting my AZ license to be a truck driver, I get an email telling me that, hey, your house is actually being pulled in 3 different directions.
Hmm.
The situation is I have this massive, they call it a traverse tree.
Yeah.
Um, it's like this, it's kind of like if you see those trees in Africa, the massive ones, it's kind of
Yeah.
like that type of tree. And I have one that's fairly close behind my house.
Hmm.
And, you know, so what happened, I guess I might as well just quickly describe, what my house was at that time. It
Yeah.
was just basically a 700 square foot, it's very simple, master bedroom, a bathroom, a spare room, an open concept kitchen, living room, area. And it was just built on a cement pad, so nothing fancy. In fact, the cement pad, it actually busted up so many times with the earth. The earth moves a lot when there's lots of rain and everything. But anyways, and it was just a 2x4 frame, plywood, um, house, not finished inside, a zinc roof. So it was very simple, very plain, but just, suited my needs just perfectly.
Hmm.
In the years past, actually, the plywood actually rotted, so we had to replace it with some like a plywood mixed cement, so it wouldn't rot. But then anyway, so like I said, so fast forward 2013, what had happened is this tree was starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because what was happening was the roots were kind of growing around the foundation and under the foundation.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden the roots started to expand. So basically what happened is, like I said, I get this email in 2013 and it says, hey, your house is being pulled in 3 different directions by all these roots. And,
Wow.
we anticipate in a year it's going to kind of collapse on itself.
Yeah.
And man, if I had realized what I was getting myself into then, I would have just said, let the house collapse on itself. Because in the meantime, well, because I'm also planning for this bike ride
Yeah.
kind of deal. That's my focus. That's my goal, is the priority is to do this bike ride. But I was just got the AZ license, and I was, for the first time literally in my entire life, actually making a very good paycheck. And so they had this idea, like, hey, we have this plan of dismantling the house and rebuilding it like 4 feet off the ground. We'll put in pillars and whatever,
Yeah.
and raise it off the ground 4 feet. And then that way the house, or the roots, can grow wherever they want, kind of deal.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, we'll raise it 4 feet, we'll rebuild it, and we'll put this like wraparound deck around it.
Yeah.
And it made sense at the time because, one, I'm making good money, and yeah, I just got into this career, so yeah, go ahead and do that. Probably, like, not that I want to add this to the video necessarily, but it ended up being one of the biggest financial mistakes in my life, just because it was a quote unquote renovation. And anyone
Yeah.
that's actually been part of a renovation
Yeah.
realizes that it just goes 3 times bigger than it was meant to,
Yeah.
expense wise, work wise. It just became, being in the jungle, third world country. And then actually what the worst part was, or one of the worst parts was there was a time when we were tied to the US dollar, a buck for a buck.
Yeah.
And that would have been in around 2000, like that would have been like, I don't know when it started, it wasn't, but like, for example, 2011, 2012,
Yeah.
the early parts of 2013 or whatever, I don't know, however long it was, we were tied $1 to $1. And then literally about 3 weeks into the project, once they've just literally started to dismantle the house, our Canadian dollar tanked to 70 cents kind of deal. So literally overnight, I lost 30% overnight. Um,
Wow.
and we had already started and committed to the project.
Yeah.
And so it just became this mammoth project that just got way out of hand. But whatever, it is what it is. And so yeah, the house got rebuilt, and it was also got finished, like on the inside. Like before, it wasn't finished on the inside, it got finished on the inside. And I made the exterior of the house is basically exactly the same as the initial design.
Yeah.
But changes I made is I actually made the bathroom into an ensuite bathroom rather than having to leave the master bedroom to access the bathroom. It's now an ensuite bathroom.
Okay.
And then also they actually put a loft above the kitchen. There was
Yeah.
actually used to be this massive peaked roof, and there was actually space to actually put a loft. So they put a loft, and so yeah, it's sort of basically completely finished inside, which obviously added to
Cool.
the toll of the project kind of deal.
How many
But
square
anyways,
feet is that?
Sorry?
How many square feet is that?
Well, initially, so I think the inside is like 1,000 square feet, because initially it was 700. So basically the floor print is about 700 square feet.
Right.
And I think it adds almost close to 300 square feet. If I'm not mistaken, these are just numbers that I don't usually keep in my head. So I could be, but I believe the I just said it now, the loft or whatever above the kitchen added like another 300 square feet. But then also, like I said, they put a massive, it's massive in the sense that it goes completely 100% around the house, but they added this deck around the house that I think, if I recall correctly, he also said something, I think he said it's about 1,000 square feet of deck around the house kind of deal.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so that was 2013. That dragged for a few years, 2-3 years, to that whole thing. And then what happened is shortly thereafter, at some point during that process, I forget how many years ago it was now, Hilda passed. And Mel, he actually got really bad dementia. He actually got, I guess they call it like violent dementia. And what happened with Mel is quite a few years ago, because he was a cattle farmer through and through. And quite a few years ago, a tree literally fell on his head, literally. And I don't know if you've ever tried to lift a tree. Like, I'm not talking about like a tree fell on his head. He should have died for sure. Like, you know what I mean? But it felt like it hit him in the head, because he was in the jungle with the chainsaw. Let's put it this way: he was in the jungle with the chainsaw, and I mean, he's doing this. I mean, he was in his 60s. He's been doing this kind of stuff his entire life. His like the farm, the 30-acre parcel, that the main farm. He actually, as a young guy, a teenager, whatever, early 20s, I forget at what stage that he, took that farm over. He actually cleared those 30 acres with a machete and an axe. His hands were so big. I'm not kidding you. His hands were so big, he couldn't actually use a phone or a cell phone or a TV controller. His hands were like, honestly, you never saw it. Like, and that was just pure. Like I said, he cleared, and everyone said he was crazy that he couldn't do it, but that was back in the day before chainsaws back then. And so he cleared 30 acres of jungle with his bare hands.
Wow.
The guy was at 60 years old. I mean, I know you're a big guy. Like he'd walk right over you. Like he was a machine.
Wow.
And that's probably why he did live when, like I say, when a tree hit him in the head.
Gee.
He would have been in the jungle with his chainsaw, and something would have fallen. But I mean, you don't cut little thick branches. He uses a machete to cut little branches. So whatever he cut was massive, and it hit him. And so he literally crawled X amount of miles because he had two, because he actually had at the time, he actually had another farm down the river ways. He had 100 acres, and that's where he kept most of his cattle.
Yeah.
And that's where he was. So he was isolated miles and miles down the river at this other farm.
Yeah.
And the tree hit him in the head. And the story that I got is he literally crawled to the canoe and somehow got himself X amount of miles back to the farm. And I was told, like, if you had seen what he looked like, he was just a bloody mess. Like he should have died that night for sure.
Yeah.
But anyways, when you get hit in the head like that, things are going to get mixed up. And so X amount of years later, dementia kicked in. And then what happened is when his wife passed, then his dementia just spiraled. It was really sad. It was just, I mean, Mel, over the years, I considered him probably one of my most cherished friends of my entire life, kind of deal. I actually often think about when I left originally, like I said, I left Belize in 1998. I mean, we used to work side by side when I was there. And sometimes like I could, if I think about it, it's like I could almost weep thinking about, like, he was the kind of guy that regardless of what job you were doing, whether you liked it or not, you could work beside him for the rest of your life and be content. That's the kind of influence that he had, his presence. He had such an amazing influence and presence. Like I said, I could work beside him every day for the rest of my life and be content. And so sometimes when I think about it, how I left in 1998, I wonder if it was just one of the biggest regrets of my entire life, just because I enjoyed just hanging with him so much, kind of deal.
Yeah.
But anyways, so his wife passes, his dementia gets really bad. He ends up having to live with his one brother, kind of deal. And his one son basically, I guess you could say, inherits the farm, kind of deal, except the son is not interested in the farm. He's a city boy. He hates coming out, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. So to add to the story, basically in 2017, I believe it was, this was right before Mel passed. Mel passed, I think, about 2 years ago at Christmas. So maybe like 27 months ago, he would have passed. Anyways, I was able to negotiate with the son to purchase some of the original farm. Basically, I was able to acquire the 30 acres that the rice had been on back there when my first trip where we came to harvest the rice. That was on the second 30-acre parcel. So I was able to purchase that 30-acre parcel, and then I was able to purchase 10 acres off the main farm, kind of deal. So that so 40 acres in 2017. Now, since then, basically all of the farm, well, I mean, the first 30 acres, that had been originally mostly jungle, kind of deal. The main farm, as Mel was getting older and having a harder and harder time to keep up with things because the jungle just never stops growing, most of that basically ended up becoming just reclaimed jungle. So most of that 40 acres is basically just reclaimed jungle. I had over the years, just with some vision, is I started planting coconuts. We used to have cattle on the farm, but they were his mom's cows, and they were wild. They were crazy. They would break through fences. They would get into our stuff and yada, yada, yada. We finally were able to convince Mel to get rid of these cows off the farm. But then it's like, okay, well, now what do you do with the farm if there's no cows on them? And so I had the idea, like, hey, let's plant coconut trees. Because coconuts are in high demand, especially like nowadays with coconut water and this and that, and with tourism. A coconut you can sell for $1 US to other suppliers, kind of deal. And coconut has they bear about 100 coconuts a year, kind of deal. So I said, hey, let's just start planting coconut trees on the cleared land, kind of deal. And so over the years, I had planted like 500 coconuts over certain areas, certain sections that hadn't regrown, kind of deals. So Now, some of those coconuts are on the existing farm kind of deal, the existing land, but I think give or take, I have close to 400 coconuts on my coconut trees on my
Oh wow.
piece. Um, and most of them are young. Most of them are maybe say 4 or 5 feet high kind of deal. They're not,
And,
they're still many years from bearing, but
and sorry, you said a tree bears 100 coconuts a year. Is that what you just said?
yeah, usually, yeah, the average,
Wow,
yeah, if you got a healthy, good coconut tree,
that's
they,
cool.
they're good for about 100 coconuts a year. And if you harvest them for the water,
Yeah.
you can sell them to vendors in the city for say like a dollar US kind of deal. So that's sort of my backup plan when this ride is over. It's
Yeah.
like if nothing comes of it other than the fact I just finished this ride,
Yeah.
the hope is that okay, by then my coconuts are old enough that they're actually producing coconuts, and I'll just
Yeah. So you're a tree
yeah.
guy. What does the maintenance look like for a coconut tree? You just plant it. Is it hard to take care of, or you just kind of leave it?
Um, it's a combination. Like it's not like for the most part. Like the thing is because of the way the ride went,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden it became very sudden. Like um, not to really drag this in again, but because I was engaged and I was supposed to move to Arizona,
Yeah.
and I thought this bike ride was not going to happen. I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do in Arizona? I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe this is a time to invest my future, some energies into Belize, because that would be the plan, is as quickly as we could, is we would then move to Belize.
Yeah.
And so it was during this time was when I acquired the 40 acres kind of deal. So
Hmm.
I was really focused on developing, a maintenance kind of deal for the farm.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, then the engagement fell through, and then the bike ride became like complete total 100% priority. So
Yeah.
basically, I sent them an email saying, okay, anything that is non-essential, because it's actually very expensive for me to maintain that place. But
Hmm.
it's not a cheap hobby by any
Yeah.
means. And so basically, I kiboshed any unnecessary maintenance. Now, and so that being said, though, the coconuts do get a little bit of maintenance.
Yeah.
They probably should get more maintenance than they do. But basically, what it is basically is in regards to the maintenance of the coconuts is every X amount of months they send a tractor, a bush hog. We hire out through the Mennonites. They come down our
Hmm.
road. When they come down our road to cut the grass on the main road, because everything just keeps growing and growing, and it takes no time before the grass is 3 feet high kind of deal.
Hmm.
So anyways, when the Mennonites come down to cut our laneway, our road, because that's the thing, because that's kind of the crappy thing. It's great, but kind of the crappy thing about living at the end of the dead end road, where there is no government maintenance by any means. Like
Yeah.
basically, we have to maintain our entire road all
Hmm.
the way down, and technically it's a road allowance, which means it's a government road, but we
Yeah.
actually have to pay to maintain it because
Hmm.
nobody else lives down there, so no one else is going to do it. And
Yeah.
it's a third world country, which means the government is not going to pay.
Gee.
You know what I mean? So when we hire the Mennonites to come and cut our main road, then they'll come in and they'll he'll whip through the coconut fields kind of
Yeah.
deal. Um, and so every X amount of months, a bush hog comes through and cuts the grass. The other thing is what happens on occasion. Well, the jungle never stops growing. It never ever stops growing. And so
Yeah.
basically what happens is the first stage of regrowth for the jungle is vines.
Hmm.
Vines start coming up, and basically and what everything is trying to do when the jungle regrows, what everything is trying to do is basically reach for the sun.
Hmm.
And so the vines are the quickest growing. And what they want to do is they want to attach themselves to a tree, a sapling, or whatever,
Yeah.
and try to get to the top of that tree to get to the sunlight.
Yeah.
And so what happens on occasion, I mean, it's not is the vines, they grow around the coconut tree trying to reach the top, but they don't strangle, but in a way they do strangle it. So,
Hmm.
sporadically, depending, and I mean, obviously when it's a full, like in a full grown coconut tree, that's not an issue. But when they're young, the vines grow around, and then that prevents the palm fronds from, so every
Right.
couple months they have to rip those vines off the base, from the base of the tree.
Gotcha.
If we have a really bad drought, because of climate change, the rainy season is more severe and the dry is, it's both, like the rain is more severe and the dry is more severe. So,
Yeah.
so when that dry, if it's, really, really bad,
Yeah.
then you have to sometimes go around and water the coconuts.
Mm.
And then there is, coconut trees, they do die, sometimes, like if things get flooded or whatever, or something, yeah, coconuts die, and then you have to replace them, kind of deal.
Right.
So not a huge amount of maintenance, but if you want to make sure they're still there in X amount of years, then you probably should do something, because yeah, I mean, like, if we don't cut the grass, at some point the grass will get higher than the coconuts, kind of deal, especially when they're young.
Yeah. Oh,
So
cool.
a little bit of maintenance, but nothing exorbitant.
That's pretty cool. So you said 500 trees. Is that right? 500
Yeah, like I
trees.
said, I think about 400 of them are on my particular land.
Now, are you counting those in your million trees that you're
No,
in your
actually, no,
life
I've
goal?
never really counted them. Because that's the other interesting thing is, like, maybe at some point, like, they're just, because they're coconuts, they're not.
Yeah.
Thing is they're not really environmentally beneficial as far as trees. I'm pretty
True.
sure they're not. Anyways, I mean, they produce coconut water, which is, extremely healthy for human
Yeah.
beings. So it's coconut. Coconuts are, unlike, say, in Indonesia, where they're clearing all the rainforest for these palm
Right.
trees, to go into soft drink or whatever.
Yeah.
That is, that's unhealthy. That's pure devastation of the rainforest. And that palm oil is completely unhealthy.
Yeah.
Where here, like, coconut water is actually extremely healthy for you.
Yeah.
So it's not a horrible thing to have coconuts, for sure. And there is a huge demand for coconuts, for sure. And
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it this way: where I planted the coconuts specifically, that land, I don't want to say that land was wrecked by any means, but that was in the areas where the cattle had really kind of done their thing, where in many ways the jungle actually was like, the jungle wasn't coming back, because, like I said, a lot of the land is literally reclaimed jungle, where Mel
Mm.
could not keep up with the farming, and
Yeah.
so the jungle just sort of came back.
Gee.
Where my coconuts are is where the jungle wasn't coming back, kind of
Right.
deal. It had been grass for so long that,
Yeah.
only weeds, it was just grass and weeds,
Yeah.
kind of deal. So let's put it this way: I didn't cut any trees down for the purposes of these coconuts.
All right.
It was already cleared land that had been cleared for so many years that,
Hmm.
even with neglect, the jungle wasn't coming back,
Right.
kind of deal. So
That's cool.
that being said, you know, all all that area is planted.
Yeah.
In the future, I may actually cut out some of these coconut trees to put more beneficial trees.
Mm.
Actually, probably good to talk about, what my vision, my future for the farm, what I'd like to
Mm.
see happen is, yeah, because, and I've mentioned this many times, is, I have this legacy goal, this dream of planting 1 million trees in my lifetime, or planting, or having had planted, through other sources or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would like to turn as much of my land into some kind of nursery, whatever that may or may not look like in the future.
Mm.
And so, but I mean, that is something that is this grand plan. And I don't know what that looks like. And I don't know at this stage, I don't know how um, to take the next steps at this stage, especially partially because I'm on the bike ride. And
Yeah.
actually, I should even just mention, like, if you happen to be listening or watching at this point, like, if you love Belize and you want to see trees planted and you have financial resources, give me a call, because I can, we can figure something out. Especially if you want to live in Belize and you've
Yeah.
got a little bit of money and you want trees planted, I've got lots of land. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, yeah. And so that being said, whenever that starts to take some kind of form, whenever that starts to get worked on, if I have to cut these coconut trees out to replant more beneficial trees, or for whether for trees that will grow seeds, future seeds for seedlings or that kind of thing, then I'll just slowly, incrementally remove some of these coconut trees. You know what I mean? Because like I said, they're not really a beneficial tree, and my focus is that my goal, my dream is to actually have trees planted. So like the coconuts are kind of the backup plan if life goes for a dump, and I can't seem to get anything going in that direction, or it takes 10 times longer than I need to, or it needs to, and I have no money, I can potentially, when because I could get to the end of this bike ride and my bank account be completely empty. You know what I mean? And then I'm kind of screwed. But if I've got at least enough money that I could maybe put up a chicken coop there, and maybe like a little vegetable garden. So it's like I could fly to Belize from Argentina, buy 50 chickens, and they'll be like, okay, you're my meat chickens. You're the ones that are going to raise, have eggs, and you're going to be the future, whatever. And then I got my meat source, and I get some rice because rice is cheap. And then I've got my coconuts, and that basically kind of puts some food on my plate. So I'm literally not this homeless person living in a box kind of deal. And so the coconuts are kind of like the backup plan. But if doors get open that I can get this nursery going, and this and that, then I'll just incrementally just sort of cut the coconuts down and replace them with more beneficial trees kind of deal. But at least while I'm pedaling my bike, they're growing, and hopefully by the time the bike ride is done, they're producing. So.
Awesome. Very interesting stuff. It's good to hear the context behind your love for Belize.
I'm at host places, hosts, they ask me about Belize. Or even anyone that I can talk for hours and hours and hours and hours about Belize. I
interesting
love
place.
Oh yeah, no, you know what? And it's not for everyone. A lot of people talk about, I heard about Belize. It sounds like an amazing. I'd love to live there. And we don't have Walmart. We don't have Amazon.com or Amazon.ca.
Not even Timmy's?
No.
Gosh.
They actually have a Subway. Believe it or not, they actually have a Subway. But that's it. They have okay. So as far as like international, other than hotels kind of deal, but as far as retail corporations that the average person would have heard of, they have a Subway, and they have an Ace Hardware, which I think is American, not Canadian. So I don't even know if you've ever heard of it. Well, maybe I forget. No, anyways, they have a Subway and they have an Ace Hardware. That's it.
Wow.
That's the only two North American corporations that would be familiar. Other than that, so it's like, no Walmart, no Amazon. Everything is very labor intensive. You've got the heat, the humidity, you got the bugs, you got all that kind of stuff. So, it's not for everyone by any means. But for me, literally every aspect of being down there, the country, the culture, the hardships, I love it.
It's like you said, everything you're describing, it's like someone else's nightmare, but someone else's just paradise.
In one sense, for certain people, it's one man's nightmare, but another one's paradise. And for me, it's definitely paradise.
Awesome.
I couldn't imagine. To me, it's home for sure.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Arie, for diving deep.
I could still go. Actually, there's part of me I want to go on for hours. Literally, I actually do. But I guess all I can say is thank you if you've actually watched this far. And also, maybe what I'll do is
subscribe.
Please subscribe. The other thing is I did do somewhat of a blog post that covers some of this. If you want to see the written version of it, or there might even be some other tidbits in there and some photos. And so I'll make sure that I'll even, I can do that. You don't have to. I'll put in the blog post link. To this side of things.
Sounds good.
And maybe I'll just do a teaser. If you've watched this far, we are actually going to do another video on Belize if you're actually interested in visiting. And so, you'll want to check that video for sure. And at some point when that's posted, I guess we should link it to this video after the fact. Yeah, we're gonna do another extended video on if you actually would like to visit Belize, because my house is sitting very, very empty right now, and it costs me a lot of money to maintain. So if you're considering a vacation or an adventure, I would really, really suggest strongly that you consider Belize, because honestly, it's an amazing country. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. If you've made it this far, really appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you in the next episode of the Safari Arie Roadshow and the Safari Arie Experience. Take care.
Awesome.
Bye.